A king once ate himself to death. A whiskey legend died from kicking his own safe. A man once tried to sell the Eiffel Tower to a total stranger and got away with it, and a pilot flew to the wrong country on purpose and swore for the rest of his life it was an accident. And that's just the warm-up. These are 49 real people whose sheer stupidity got them permanently written into the history books. And by the end of this video, you won't believe humans actually did these things. Hit subscribe now, because you do not want to miss what these humans do next. And stick around, because number 30 is almost too dumb to be true. 1. Everyone assumes early aviation only killed reckless daredevils, but one Parisian tailor proved plain overconfidence could be just as deadly. In 1912, Franz Reichelt climbed the Eiffel Tower, wearing a bulky suit he had sewn himself, and was fully convinced it worked as a parachute. He had tested it on dummies with mixed results, yet trusted his own design completely. Crowds gathered below, expecting a triumphant glide through the Paris sky. Instead, he hesitated for several seconds, then jumped, and the suit failed instantly, sending him straight to the ground below. 2. History loves to pretend Viking warriors only died in glorious battle. Yet one earl's downfall came from a grudge that outlived his enemy. Sigurd the Mighty defeated a rival named Mael Brigte in single combat, and to celebrate, strapped the man's severed head to his saddle as a trophy. As he rode home victorious, the head's protruding tooth scraped his leg, opening a small wound nobody thought twice about. Within days, the cut turned infected, then fatal, killing the very warrior who had just won the fight. 3. Whiskey legends are supposed to die legendary deaths, but Jack Daniel proved even icons can fall to the dumbest possible accident. One morning, he forgot the combination to his own office safe and after several failed attempts, lost his temper completely. He reared back and kicked the safe as hard as he could, hoping to force it open through sheer frustration. The kick badly broke his toe, and the injury never healed properly, leading to a severe infection that spread through his body. That single moment of anger toward a stubborn safe ended up killing the man behind one of America's most famous whiskey brands. 4. Kings are remembered for wars and conquests, but one Swedish monarch secured his place in history through a single legendary dinner. In 1771, King Adolf Frederick sat down to a massive feast, loaded with lobster caviar sauerkraut, smoked herring, and champagne. Just when the meal seemed complete, he decided there was room for dessert, and ordered his favorite semla pastries floating in warm milk. He ate 14 servings of the dessert, without stopping, despite his body clearly signaling enough was enough. Hours later, he died from severe digestive complications, earning him the unforgettable nickname the King Who Ate Himself to Death. 5. Ancient Greek tragedy usually happens on stage, but one playwright became the punchline of his own real-life disaster. Aeschylus was known for writing gods, heroes, and cosmic irony, yet fate decided to write his ending instead. According to ancient accounts, an eagle flying overhead was carrying a tortoise and searching for a rock to crack its shell open. Mistaking the playwright's bald head for the perfect surface, the eagle dropped the tortoise directly onto him from a great height. The impact reportedly killed him instantly, turning one of history's greatest storytellers into the subject of the strangest possible twist ending. 6. Conquerors are supposed to die charging into battle, but Attila the Hun met his end at his own wedding celebration instead. Known across Europe as a terrifying warlord who brought empires to their knees, Attila seemed untouchable on any battlefield. During the festivities honoring his marriage to a new bride, he reportedly drank far more than usual while celebrating his success. That night, he suffered a severe nosebleed, and because he was lying flat and heavily intoxicated, he was unable to wake or respond. By morning, the man who terrified the Roman Empire had died quietly, choking on his own blood. 7. Dancers spend their lives obsessing over grace and movement, but one performer's signature style ended up costing her everything. Isadora Duncan was famous for her flowing scarves and dramatic outdoor performances that captivated audiences across Europe. While riding as a passenger in an open-top convertible, she wrapped one of her long silk scarves around her neck for style. The scarf's loose end drifted outside the car and became tangled in the spokes of the rear wheel almost immediately. The force yanked her violently from her seat and snapped her neck, instantly ending the life of one of dance's most celebrated icons. 8. Surviving Niagara Falls sounds like the ultimate death-defying feat, but for one man, it turned out to be the easy part. Bobby Leach became famous in 1911 after riding over the falls inside a steel barrel and walking away with only minor injuries. Newspapers celebrated him as a fearless legend who had cheated death in the most dramatic way imaginable. Years later, while walking down a street in New Zealand, He slipped on a discarded orange peel and fell hard onto the pavement. The fall caused a leg injury that became infected and ultimately killed the man who had once conquered a waterfall. 9. Lawyers build careers proving points in court, but one attorney took that job description far too literally. Clement Vallandigham was defending a client accused of murder and wanted to show the jury the victim could have shot himself. To demonstrate his theory, he picked up what he believed was an unloaded pistol, matching the one used in the crime. He positioned it exactly as he claimed the victim had held it and pulled the trigger in front of everyone in the courtroom. The gun was still loaded, and the demonstration killed him instantly, though his death ironically helped win the case for his client. 10. Health enthusiasts love bragging about their diets, but one man's obsession with a single vegetable juice ended in the strangest possible way. Basil Brown believed carrot juice held miraculous healing properties and began drinking extreme quantities of it every single day. Over time, his skin gradually shifted into a deep orange shade, yet he saw this as proof his health regimen was working perfectly. His liver was silently overloading with dangerously high levels of vitamin A that his body had no way of processing safely. The buildup eventually caused fatal liver damage, turning his obsession with clean living into a bizarre cautionary tale. 11. Lawyers are trained to argue with words, but one Toronto attorney decided to argue with a window instead and paid for it with his life. Gary Hoy loved showing new recruits and visitors that his office building's windows were completely unbreakable no matter what. To prove his point, he would throw his body against the glass on the 24th floor to demonstrate its strength during tours. He had performed this stunt safely many times before and treated it like a signature party trick everyone expected. On one demonstration, the window popped entirely out of its frame, sending him plummeting to his death in front of stunned witnesses. 12. Death row inmates rarely get a second chance at life, but one man's strange twist of fate makes his story impossible to forget. Michael Anderson Godwin was sentenced to die in the electric chair after a violent crime and awaited execution for years. His sentence was eventually commuted and reduced, letting him serve out his time in prison instead of facing the chair. Years later, while sitting on a metal prison toilet, he tried to fix his TV and bit into a wire to strip it. The exposed wire sent a fatal jolt of electricity through his body, killing him through electrocution, despite escaping the very fate he once feared. 13. Kings are supposed to command armies and win wars, but one French monarch met his end through the most embarrassing household accident imaginable. Charles VIII ruled France and was known for his ambitious military campaigns across Italy during his reign. While rushing through his castle at Amboise to watch a game of jeu de paume, he forgot about a low stone doorway. He struck his head hard against the top of the frame while walking through it at full speed without ducking. The blow caused severe trauma, and he collapsed and died hours later, ending his reign over something as simple as a door. 14. Medieval kings usually die from war disease or betrayal, but one Aragonese monarch supposedly met his end through his own stomach and a bad joke. Martin I of Aragon was known for enjoying enormous feasts and rarely holding back at the dinner table. After eating an excessive amount of food one evening, he began suffering from severe and painful indigestion that left him in visible distress. His court jester attempted to lighten the mood by telling him a joke that apparently struck him as hilarious in the moment. The combination of unbearable laughter and violent stomach pain proved too much for his body, killing him, according to popular legend. 15. Wildlife experts usually earn their title through years of formal training, but one self-declared bear whisperer trusted his instincts instead, and it cost him everything. Timothy Treadwell spent 13 summers camping among wild grizzly bears in Alaska, insisting he had earned their trust and friendship. He filmed himself getting remarkably close to the massive animals, believing his gentle approach had somehow made him one of them. Friends and park officials repeatedly warned him that grizzlies were unpredictable and dangerous no matter how many summers he spent with them. In his final season, one of the bears he trusted attacked and killed him along with his girlfriend, proving nature was never actually his friend. 16. Startup decisions can make or lose fortunes, but one man's nervous exit from a tiny computer company became one of the costliest regrets in business history. Ron Wayne helped found Apple alongside Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and even designed the company's original logo himself. Worried about potential financial liability if the young company failed, he decided to sell his 10% ownership stake almost immediately. He walked away with just $800, believing he was making the smart and cautious choice for his future. That small stake would eventually have been worth well over $100 billion, turning his caution into legendary business folklore. 17. Record labels are supposed to have an ear for talent, but one company's rejection letter became the most embarrassing mistake in music industry history. Decca Records auditioned a young British band in 1962, and executives sat down afterward to decide whether they were worth signing. After listening to the audition tapes, the label's decision-makers concluded that guitar-based groups were simply a fading trend. They told the band's manager directly that guitar groups were on their way out, and passed on signing them entirely. That rejected band was the Beatles, and Decca's refusal remains one of the most infamous blunders in entertainment history. 18. Companies love protecting their most profitable products, but one photography giant buried its own breakthrough invention, and it ended up costing them everything. An engineer at Kodak invented the world's first digital camera back in 1975 and proudly demonstrated the working prototype to company executives. Instead of embracing the innovation leadership, worried it would destroy their hugely profitable film and printing business, and quietly shelved the project. For decades, Kodak continued prioritizing film, while competitors developed and popularized digital photography for the mass consumer market. When digital cameras finally took over the industry completely, Kodak collapsed into bankruptcy, despite having invented the technology first. 19. Telecommunications history is full of missed opportunities, but one company's dismissal of a groundbreaking invention remains almost impossible to believe today. Alexander Graham Bell offered to sell his telephone patent to Western Union, hoping the established telegraph giant would see its potential. Company executives reviewed the offer and concluded that the device was nothing more than an interesting novelty with no real commercial future. They rejected the deal outright, confident that telegraph technology would remain the dominant form of long-distance communication. Within just a few years, the telephone transformed global communication entirely, while Western Union's decision became a permanent symbol of corporate short-sightedness. 20. Soda companies rarely make headlines for their recipes, but one beverage giant's attempt to fix something that was not broken sparked immediate nationwide outrage. In 1985, Coca-Cola executives decided to discontinue their original decades-old formula and replace it with a sweeter reformulated version called New Coke. Company leadership believed taste tests proved customers wanted the change, and rolled out the new product with enormous confidence and marketing. Instead, furious customers flooded phone lines with complaints and organized public protests demanding the return of the original beloved recipe. Facing overwhelming backlash, the company reversed its decision after just 79 days, bringing back the original formula for good. 21. Car companies dream of building the next big hit, but one automaker's overhyped vehicle became the ultimate symbol of a spectacular flop instead. Ford poured millions of dollars into developing the Edsel throughout the 1950s, promising it would revolutionize the entire automobile industry. Massive advertising campaigns built up incredible anticipation, promising groundbreaking design features that would leave every competitor far behind in the market. When the car finally launched in 1958, customers found it overpriced, oddly styled, and completely underwhelming compared to the endless hype. Sales collapsed almost immediately, and the Edsel became permanent shorthand across American business culture for an embarrassing, costly corporate failure. 22. Wealthy visionaries often dream big, but one billionaire's obsession with aviation produced arguably the most expensive one-time flight in history. Howard Hughes spent a staggering fortune designing and building an enormous wooden aircraft nicknamed the Spruce Goose during the 1940s. Critics and government officials repeatedly questioned whether the massive plane would ever actually leave the ground given its unusual construction. In 1947, Hughes personally piloted the aircraft himself, and it managed to fly for less than 1 full mile total. Despite the astronomical cost and years of development, the plane never flew again, becoming a monument to extravagant ambition. 23. Military commanders are trained to follow orders carefully, but one garbled message sent hundreds of British soldiers straight into a suicidal disaster. During the Crimean War in 1854, a British cavalry unit received an unclear and poorly worded order from their commanding officers. Confused about which enemy position they were actually supposed to attack, the cavalry charged directly toward heavily fortified Russian artillery instead. Soldiers realized almost immediately they were riding straight into overwhelming cannon fire with virtually no chance of survival or victory. The disastrous charge resulted in massive casualties and became immortalized in poetry as a haunting symbol of military miscommunication. 24. Conquerors typically plan their campaigns with careful precision, but one emperor's ambition completely ignored the most basic seasonal reality of geography. Napoleon Bonaparte marched an enormous army of roughly 600,000 troops deep into Russian territory during his ambitious 1812 invasion. His forces pushed forward confidently, expecting quick victories without adequately preparing supplies, clothing, or shelter for the brutal Russian winter ahead. As temperatures plummeted dramatically, his soldiers began suffering from starvation, frostbite, and exhaustion while retreating across the frozen countryside. By the time the campaign ended, most of his massive army had perished, making it one of history's costliest military miscalculations. 25. Some historical mistakes are so remarkable, they eventually inspired an entire cultural phenomenon, celebrating human error at its finest. The Darwin Awards emerged as a tongue-in-cheek tradition, honoring real people whose spectacularly foolish decisions removed them from the human gene pool entirely. Stories ranged from reckless stunts to bizarre accidents, all sharing one common theme of astonishingly poor judgment under completely avoidable circumstances. The concept spread rapidly through books, websites, and word of mouth, becoming a beloved staple of internet culture worldwide. What began as dark humor eventually became a shared celebration of humanity's endless capacity for wonderfully dumb decision-making. 26. College football moments rarely become more infamous than one player's confused sprint in the opposite direction during a nationally watched championship game. Roy Riegels recovered a fumble during the 1929 Rose Bowl and instinctively took off running as fast as he possibly could. Somewhere in the excitement and chaos, he became disoriented and began sprinting 69 yards straight toward his own team's end zone. Teammates screamed and chased after him, desperately trying to turn him around before he crossed the wrong goal line entirely. His mistake nearly cost his team the game and earned him the permanent nickname Wrong Way Riegels in football history. 27. Baseball history remembers plenty of legendary plays, but one routine ground ball became one of the most painful moments in World Series history. Bill Buckner was playing first base for the Boston Red Sox during Game 6 of the 1986 World Series against the Mets. With his team just one out away from finally winning a championship, a slow ground ball rolled directly toward his position. Instead of scooping it up cleanly, the ball rolled straight through his legs, allowing the winning run to score for the opposing team. The Red Sox lost the series shortly after, and Buckner's error became forever linked to the team's championship drought. 28. Fast food promotions are supposed to bring joy to customers, but one security contractor turned an entire beloved game into a massive criminal scheme instead. Jerome Jacobson worked for the company responsible for printing and distributing winning game pieces for McDonald's popular Monopoly promotion for years. Using his inside access, he secretly stole the most valuable winning pieces and distributed them through a network of friends and associates. Investigators eventually noticed a suspicious pattern where an unusually high number of major prize winners were somehow all connected to each other. The scheme unraveled completely once federal investigators traced the connections back to Jacobson, turning a fun promotion into a nationwide fraud case. 29. Inventors often trust their own creations completely, but one businessman's fatal accident, involving his signature product, remains a strange and tragic irony. Jimmy Heselden owned the company that manufactured the Segway personal transportation device and used the machines regularly around his own property. While riding one of his own Segways near a cliff edge on his estate, he reportedly lost control of the device unexpectedly. The machine carried him straight over the edge, and he plunged to his death on the rocky ground below. The tragic accident became darkly ironic considering he owned and profited from the very invention that ultimately killed him. 30. Explorers are remembered for their discoveries, but one legendary sailor became equally famous for stubbornly refusing to admit what he had actually found. Christopher Columbus set sail across the Atlantic in 1492, fully convinced his voyage would lead him directly to the shores of Asia. When he landed in the Caribbean, he immediately declared he had reached the outskirts of India, naming the local people Indians as a result. Despite mounting evidence, and later voyages suggesting otherwise, he continued insisting for the rest of his life that he had found Asia. He reportedly died still believing this claim, turning his historic discovery into one of history's most stubborn misunderstandings. 31. Industrial accidents rarely sound as strange as a giant wave of dessert syrup flooding an entire city neighborhood in the middle of winter. In 1919, a massive steel tank in Boston, holding over 2 million gallons of molasses, had been poorly constructed and was severely overfilled. Under pressure from unusually warm temperatures, the tank suddenly burst apart, sending a wall of thick, sticky syrup crashing through the streets at incredible speed. The wave reportedly moved at around 35 miles per hour, trapping people, horses, and buildings in its path. With almost no warning, 21 people tragically lost their lives in the disaster, which became known forever as the Great Boston Molasses Flood. 32. Modern armies with machine guns should easily handle a few thousand wild birds. But Australia discovered otherwise, in one of history's strangest military campaigns. In 1932, Australian soldiers were deployed to the Western Australia countryside to cull massive populations of emus, destroying valuable farmland and crops. Armed with machine guns, the soldiers expected an easy and quick victory over birds they assumed would be simple targets. The emus proved surprisingly fast, unpredictable, and difficult to hit, scattering in every direction whenever the soldiers attempted to open fire. After repeated failed attempts, the military embarrassingly retreated, giving the birds an unlikely victory in what became known as the Emu War. 33. Airship captains were trusted to make careful judgment calls, but one decision to land during dangerous weather ended in one of aviation's most infamous disasters. Captain Max Pruss commanded the Hindenburg and made the final call to attempt landing, despite stormy conditions filled with heavy electrical activity in the air. Officials on the ground had expressed concerns about the weather, but the massive airship proceeded with its approach toward the mooring mast anyway. As it prepared to dock, the highly flammable hydrogen gas inside the airship ignited, suddenly engulfing the entire structure in flames within seconds. The horrifying disaster killed 36 people and effectively ended the golden age of passenger airship travel forever. 34. Scam artists usually count on greed, but one legendary con relied entirely on a victim's fear of public embarrassment instead. A fraudster posing as a government official convinced a wealthy Parisian scrap metal dealer named André Poisson that the Eiffel Tower was secretly being sold for scrap. Poisson believed he was securing an incredible private deal and paid a substantial sum of money to officially become the tower's new owner. Once he realized he had been completely conned, he felt too humiliated and ashamed to report the elaborate scam to the police. The fraudster escaped completely unpunished, while Poisson quietly absorbed the massive financial loss just to protect his reputation. 35. Grief and fear can drive people toward extraordinary decisions, but one widow's response to tragedy produced one of the strangest houses ever built in America. Sarah Winchester inherited an enormous fortune from her family's firearms company after the deaths of her husband and infant daughter left her devastated. A psychic reportedly convinced her that she was haunted by spirits of everyone ever killed by Winchester rifles and would suffer the same fate unless construction never stopped. Believing this completely, she hired workers to build continuously on her mansion for decades, without any real architectural plan or purpose. The result was a sprawling 160-room maze filled with staircases leading nowhere and doors opening into walls. 36. Faking your own death sounds like the perfect escape plan, but one man's poorly executed scheme fell apart in the most avoidable way imaginable. John Darwin disappeared in 2002 after staging a canoeing accident, convincing authorities and even his own children that he had drowned at sea. His wife collected a substantial life insurance payout, while he secretly continued living in hiding, building a shockingly detailed double life. Years later, the couple attempted to move abroad together and quietly rebuild their lives far away from suspicious eyes back home. Everything unraveled after an old photograph of the supposedly dead man surfaced online, showing him alive and well with his wife. 37. Backyard games are supposed to be harmless fun, but one popular toy from the 1980s turned into one of the most dangerous products ever sold to families. A toy company introduced lawn darts, also known as jarts, marketing them as an exciting outdoor lawn game for the entire family to enjoy together. The darts themselves were essentially weighted metal spikes designed to be thrown high into the air and land inside a small target ring. Unsurprisingly, the heavy, sharp projectiles caused numerous serious injuries and even several deaths among children and adults playing in backyards nationwide. Public outrage eventually forced regulators to ban the dangerous toy, completely removing it from store shelves across the country. 38. Financial bubbles usually involve stocks or real estate, but one of history's strangest market crashes centered entirely around a single type of flower. During the 1630s, wealthy investors across the Netherlands became obsessed with tulip bulbs, treating them as valuable status symbols worth extraordinary sums of money. People began trading houses, land, and entire life savings just to acquire rare tulip varieties, believing prices would continue climbing forever, without limit. At the height of the frenzy, a single bulb could sell for more than a skilled worker earned in an entire year. Almost overnight, the market completely collapsed, wiping out fortunes and leaving countless investors holding worthless flowers instead of riches. 39. Inventors chasing the dream of a flying car rarely consider what happens when ambition outpaces basic engineering safety. Henry Smolinski attempted to build exactly that by bolting actual airplane wings onto the body of a standard Ford Pinto in the 1970s. He believed the modified vehicle could drive normally on roads and then take flight whenever the driver needed to travel long distances quickly. During a test flight demonstrating the invention, one of the wings suddenly detached from the vehicle while it was airborne over California. The aircraft crashed, immediately killing Smolinski instantly and ending any hope of his ambitious flying car ever reaching the public market. 40. Roman emperors are remembered for their brutality, but one ruler's bizarre declaration of war against nature itself remains almost too strange to believe. Emperor Caligula reportedly grew frustrated during a military campaign and impulsively declared war against the sea god Neptune himself out of sheer irritation. He ordered his confused soldiers to march toward the shoreline and attack the ocean waves directly with their swords and spears raised high. When the bizarre battle predictably produced no victory over the water, he commanded his troops to collect seashells scattered along the beach instead. He presented these seashells back in Rome as trophies, claiming a triumphant military victory over the sea itself. 41. Toy collecting rarely becomes a full-blown investment strategy, but one plush animal craze convinced ordinary people to bet their entire financial future on it. During the 1990s, Beanie Babies exploded in popularity, with collectors treating certain rare designs as guaranteed paths towards serious future wealth. Convinced prices would keep rising forever, many people quit stable jobs, took out loans, and spent their savings buying up massive collections. Some even planned their entire retirement around the assumption that these small stuffed toys would eventually sell for enormous sums of money. The market collapsed almost overnight, leaving countless collectors holding closets full of worthless plush toys instead of the fortune they expected. 42. Daredevils are known for pushing limits, but one stunt performer's plan to leap across an entire canyon on a rocket-powered vehicle pushed things a little too far. Evel Knievel attempted to jump across the massive Snake River Canyon in 1974 using a custom-built rocket-powered vehicle called the Sky Cycle. Thousands of spectators gathered, expecting to witness history as the rocket launched him off the ramp and soared out over the deep canyon below. Partway through the flight, the parachute deployed prematurely due to a mechanical malfunction, slowing his forward momentum unexpectedly. Instead of landing safely on the far side, he drifted helplessly back down into the canyon itself, surviving thanks only to the safety parachute. 43. Tech investors are supposed to spot the next big opportunity early, but one company's dismissive rejection became one of the costliest missed deals in internet history. In 1999, two young entrepreneurs offered to sell their small search engine startup to the company Excite for a relatively modest asking price. Executives at Excite reviewed the technology and concluded it was unremarkable compared to their existing search capabilities and passed on the opportunity entirely. They saw no reason to spend even a small fraction of their budget acquiring what seemed like just another basic search tool. That startup was Google, and Excite's rejection remains one of the most infamous missed opportunities in business history. 44. Parents usually try to protect their children from illness, but one bizarre trend in the 2000s had them mailing infection directly through the postal service instead. A strange practice emerged online where parents intentionally exposed their kids to chickenpox, believing early natural infection was safer than waiting or vaccinating later. Some parents began mailing lollipops and other items that had been licked by infected children directly to other families requesting them. Recipients would then give these items to their own children, hoping to intentionally trigger a mild case of the illness at home. Health officials strongly condemned the dangerous practice, warning that shipping infectious materials through the mail posed serious and unpredictable health risks. 45. Factory workers trust their employers to keep them safe, but one group of young women was instead instructed to do something horrifying with their own paintbrushes. During the early 20th century, factories hired women to paint watch and clock dials, using paint containing radioactive radium for its glowing effect. Supervisors instructed the workers to shape their brush tips into fine points by placing them directly between their lips before each stroke. This practice caused the women to ingest small amounts of radium repeatedly throughout each workday, over months and sometimes years of employment. Many workers later developed severe radiation-related illnesses, and the tragic case became known in history as the Radium Girls. 46. Airline crews are trained to calculate fuel with total precision, but one measurement mix-up left a massive passenger jet gliding through the sky completely powerless. In 1983, an Air Canada flight crew miscalculated the aircraft's required fuel load by mistakenly using kilograms instead of pounds during their conversion. The aircraft took off believing it carried more than enough fuel for the entire journey, when in reality, it held only a fraction of what was needed. Mid-flight, both engines shut down completely after running entirely out of fuel, leaving the pilots gliding a powerless commercial jet with no engine power. Through incredible skill, the crew managed to land the plane safely on an old, decommissioned runway in Gimli, saving everyone aboard. 47. Car companies rarely find themselves tangled up in federal drug investigations, but one struggling automaker's desperate search for funding led exactly there. John DeLorean founded his own car company hoping to produce a sleek, futuristic vehicle that would later become famous for appearing in a popular movie. As the company began running dangerously low on funds and faced serious financial collapse, DeLorean grew increasingly desperate to secure new investment quickly. He reportedly agreed to participate in a large-scale cocaine trafficking deal, believing the profits could save his failing business. Federal agents secretly recorded the entire transaction on tape, leading to his dramatic arrest and turning his car company into a cautionary tale. 48. Novelty car accessories rarely spark actual traffic collisions, but one popular yellow sign from the 1980s convinced drivers it offered them a strange form of legal protection. The baby on board sign became an incredibly popular accessory, placed in car windows by parents, hoping to alert other drivers to a child's presence inside. Somehow a widespread belief developed that displaying the sign somehow legally shielded a vehicle from ever being struck or held at fault in an accident. Some drivers reportedly became overly confident behind the wheel, believing the sign itself offered some form of magical protective immunity from collisions. This bizarre misunderstanding contributed to a wave of real accidents involving vehicles that proudly displayed the supposedly protective yellow sign. 49. Pilots are expected to fly toward their intended destination, but one aviator's mysterious detour turned into one of the most legendary excuses in aviation history. Douglas Corrigan filed an official flight plan in 1938, stating his clear intention to fly westward from New York, back toward California, in his modest aircraft. Instead of heading west, he somehow ended up flying his aging rickety plane all the way across the Atlantic Ocean toward Ireland, entirely by supposed accident. When he landed in Dublin, he insisted with a straight face that he had simply misread his compass in the thick cloud cover. Nobody truly believed his explanation, yet he stuck firmly to the story for the rest of his life, earning the nickname Wrong Way Corrigan. So there you have it, 49 people who looked history dead in the eye and said hold my beer, and somehow every single one of them made the history books for it. Whether it was eating themselves to death, kicking a safe, or declaring war on the ocean, humanity has never once disappointed us. If any of these made you laugh out loud or yell at your screen, do BrainFumble a solid, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next batch of glorious human failure. Share this with the one friend who would absolutely pull a Reichelt. Now drop a comment. Which one of these 49 idiots do you think you could have outdumbed?